That's all.
Negate it. I don't understand.
Sorry?
Why we have to negate
No, we're not trying to negate it. We're trying to see whether or not our the way we see ourselves is accurate, whether it's based in reality or we're grasping to something that doesn't exist. So,
It has to be sharp.
yeah, I mean, if I gave you a photo that's fuzzy, would that work? If it was really hazy and fuzzy, you couldn't see the picture of the face clearly, and I said, look for that person, you'd go, well, I don't know what they look like. That's why if we don't have shamatha, that's what's going to happen. We're going to sit there, and our mind will be drowsy, it'll be distracted, and we'll go, me? What's that? It's like me giving you a completely out of focus photograph that's you can hardly even recognise it's a face. I say, look, there's a person, look for them. You go, what person?
So what you're saying is when we have stronger and stronger shamatha, this feeling of me will be stronger?
Well, it's not the feeling. It's not a feeling. It's just the experience of me. I mean, when you look at a cup, it's not a feeling of a cup. It's an experience of a cup. It's not a feeling.
Experience of a visual...
Exactly. So you're experiencing the object. The experience is the experience of being me.
Do you identify with the experience of me?
Well, you just become familiar with it. Identify. Like the example, I give you a picture and I say, you're going to look for this person. If I flash that picture to you in half a second, you'll go, hang on, I need to look closely. And you just look and you go, okay, and then you look.
I think I use that word without meaning of identify, but do I, me, identify with the sense of me, with the experience of me, or is it separate in a way? Do I immerse myself in the experience of me as feeling that I am me?
You just have a clear picture of how you see yourself. That's all. You just rest in that. So there's nothing intellectual here at all. So let's continue just to make sure we have the full picture. The second step, I use this terminology from His Holiness Dalai Lama, limiting the possibilities. The technical term often you see here is establishing the pervasion. But I think limiting the possibilities is a little bit easier to appreciate that term. So what this second step is about is that if there is an independent me here, it must be findable. We must be able to point and say, there it is. So the second step is about knowing where do we have to look to be conclusive. And if this independent me really exists, it can only exist in one of two places. Either it's the same as the body and the mind, or different than the body and the mind. So we need to look in both of those places. Because if we don't look in all possible places, we won't come up with any conclusive answer. Like if I was again, you were to look for this person in a large room, but you only looked in this part of the room and you didn't find them, then you go, well, I didn't find them, but maybe they're over there somewhere. So similarly here, we need to look everywhere. And everywhere means two places. Same as the body and the mind, or different than the body and the mind. And if we don't find the me in either of those places, it cannot exist, the findable me. So now in step 3 and 4, we do the search. And we can do that in either order, either looking for the me the same as the body and the mind, or different. Usually the way that it's explained, the way we did it, and the way we see in that text is first, is it the same? Is it different? And so we see that in the text here. He says the person, if we condense that verse down, the person is not the body. So first, Same. So if it's the same as body and mind, must be final. So first we look in the body. Is the me in the body there somewhere? If we don't find, then is the me in the mind somewhere? If we don't find, then the only other place it could be is different than the body and the mind, and that's where we see the last verse, the last line of the verse, yet apart from the body and the mind, what person is there? Which means that if it's different than the body and the mind, we must be able to take away the body and the mind and be left with the me. But if we look there, we'll see there's not really anything more than the body and the mind, so the me is not different. And if we get to that point, then we'll realise the me is not findable. Meaning if you get to that point and you don't find, would be the same as you've got the picture of the person, you've looked everywhere in the room, and then you didn't see them. At that point, when you've completed the search in the room, you will have this insight. They're nowhere to be found. Similarly here, if you look everywhere, you don't find, the me is not findable. That is an experience of emptiness, and that is then what we stop the investigation, because if you've looked everywhere in the room and you didn't find them, you don't look again. I mean, if you've done it thoroughly, you know they're not there. So you stop there and you go, they're not in the room. Similarly here, you do the search. If you don't find, then you don't go, let's do the search again. Because if you've done it properly, you only need to do it once, same as you look in a room. And then you just stop and you just rest in that experience of not finding. And that's what we see actually, no, it comes later, I'll leave it till later. That's an experience of emptiness. And then what we are to do, if that comes, is just rest in that experience as long as we can. Hold that experience of not finding. Because the more that we can hold that experience, the deeper it will penetrate in our mind, the more it will have a residual effect after the meditation.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, just 1 second. On that point, let's just read the next sentence here under the verse. It says, thus, within that state of meditative equipoise, when you investigate using a subtle awareness and a complete vacuity arises, a complete vacuity means that you're looking, and you didn't find. So that didn't find is an absence of me. That's the vacuity. Such that you yourself, that for you yourself there is no appearance of even a mere trace of a being, a person, or an I who is in meditative equipoise, then when the generic image of that pure emptiness becomes clear, equipoise single-pointedly without any further elaboration or mental activity. So that what that means is when we do the search and we get to the point we don't find, and that not finding really becomes something very stable, then we hold that without then doing any more searching. And then if we continue, it says, if your manner of apprehending that non-affirming negative is a technical term, it just means emptiness is a negation of the independent me. That pure emptiness, if that becomes a little feeble, then from within a state of meditative equipoise, meditate single-pointedly investigating as before. This is the way to sustain space-like meditative equipoise. So what it's saying here is that if we do the search, we don't find, we hold that not finding experience, but probably what will happen is if we don't have very good shamatha, that experience will go very quickly. Then we go back and do the search again. If we don't find, we hold it again. So that's what's being said here. And this is called space-like meditative equipoise, meaning that when we do this, this experience of not finding is, of course, an experience, a space-like experience, because space is an absence of things. So emptiness is an absence of independent me. So that's why it's called space-like meditative equipoise. One last point here, it says, it is said that when you initially ascertain this, if you have not previously familiarised yourself with the view, then fear will arise. And if you have previously familiarised yourself with then mental joy will arise. So what it's saying here is that if we do this practice well, and we get to the point of not finding, then one of the most common experiences is fear, existential fear. Why? Because we're stuck in the two extremes. For us, there's two choices, just two options. Either there is an independent me here or there's no me. We don't see any other option, possibility. So if we start to undermine the independent me that seems to be here, and we don't seem to find it, then that not finding the independent me, we misinterpret that experience to mean no me at all. And then existential fear arises. So therefore, in this practice, if fear is arising, this existential fear is arising, usually it's a very good sign. It means we're doing the search correctly, and we're correctly coming to see there's no me to be found, but we're misinterpreting the experience. So if that fear is arising, there's a few things we can do. One is, of course, ask the question, who's having the fear? Because if you don't exist, there can be no fear. So because fear is arising, proves you exist. But then the real answer is what's being said here, is that said if you have previously familiarised yourself with the view, then mental joy will arise. So the reason, of course, that fear is arising is we have not really fully understood emptiness. We haven't understood that emptiness means functioning world. And so therefore we reflect on the view of emptiness more and more to really appreciate that emptiness doesn't mean no me, it means dependent me. And if we then familiarise ourselves with the view here, then instead of fear, you'll have a lot of joy arising.
Who's experiencing the joy?
You are. And the you, who's the you, we're going to look at in the next session. So here then, mental joy will arise because we're familiarised ourselves with the view, and then our meditation experience has confirmed what we've understood, that there is no independent me to be found at all. And we'll have a lot of joy there because we will realise that the me that I've identified with in my entire life, the one that's caused me so much mental afflictions and suffering, simply does not exist. And we'll be very happy about that. Very happy about that. One or two questions in this morning tea break. Yeah.
I have a question. When you say we're not supposed to find...
No, I didn't say that. We're not, no, do not, that is not correct. You find what you find.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not a matter of trying to confirm something. We're trying to be an empirical scientist. An empirical scientist may have a theory, but then they're trying to see what is the reality. Does that reality match the theory? So we need to leave out, we're trying to get some experience, because then we're not in being empirical. We're allowing our belief system to contaminate the experiment. So there's no right or wrong answer in this. The answer is, what do you experience? Of course, what we need to do is make sure we're doing the experiment correctly. Because if we're not doing the experiment correctly, then like an empirical scientist who runs an experiment on faulty equipment or doesn't follow the correct steps, they can get all sorts of results. So then we need to check, am I doing this experiment in a correct, methodical way? And if you are, then whatever your experience, that's your experience. But like an empirical scientist does not run an experiment once and say, well, there's the answer. What do? Repetition. Again, 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 again. So we keep running the experiment again and again and again and again, continually improving our equipment, our shamatha, and making sure that we're following the experiment in a correct way. And then we keep doing that. And what is happening is, are we again getting the same experience, or are we getting all sorts of different experiences? If we're getting all sorts of different experiences, then we go, well, hang on, maybe something not right here. I need to refine my experiment. So we need repetition. And then, of course, in addition to that, what does an empirical scientist do? Peer review. They ask their contemporaries and go, well, I've run this experiment 100 times. This is my result. What did you get? And so similarly here, we've run this experiment many times. We got this sort of repeatable result. We go and talk to a teacher or someone who's done this experiment before, say, well, this is what I got. What do you think? Am I doing it correctly, or am I going completely astray? Because remember, recently with the collider in CERN, some scientists found thought they found something that went faster than the speed of light. And they ran a few times and they still got the same result. And then they did peer review, and eventually peer review came and said, no, look, that's where you went wrong. So similes for us. You know, even though it's repeatable, maybe we're doing the same mistake every time. Then we go to a teacher or someone who's done this many times and say, well, this is what am I doing it right? So this is the procedure we should follow.
I may be going to too concrete a level, but assuming I fully accept that I am dependently arising on X% genetics and X% upbringing and experiences, and even others' perceptions of me and influences on me, but at the end of the day, I do have a memory, I have some consistency in that experience, and my body is more or less like it was yesterday. So there is something that so maybe it's only 20% me or 40% me, but it's me. I mean, there's something that I need, you know, that you say it's like either it's the body and mind or it's not the body and mind. If it's neither, but some percentage is my body and mind.
Is there some percentage of a cup to be found there? I mean, there's some consistency there. No, it's more or less the same cup that was here yesterday. I mean, similar cup tomorrow. Is there some 20% cup there? There's some consistency there, no? Isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah. So does that imply that there's something to be found just because there's some consistency? We're going to look at this in the next session.
Okay, but
So,
I know tomorrow I'll be able to drink from it.
Right. Correct.
Like I'll know already
Correct.
it's there.
Correct. It's functioning, correct. And actually what I said was that if we really understand emptiness very well, the fact that it can function means it must be empty. That takes a bit of getting to that point of understanding. But anyway, it's more time for a morning tea break. So let's take a morning tea break. Come back at 11:15 and we'll continue on.